Russia has probably the longest tradition of using information for influence. The more recent iterations are really well covered. There's a 2016 RAND report called Fire Hose of Falsehood. The Global Engagement Center has actually done in 2020 a very comprehensive report on the ecosystem of Russian propaganda and disinformation. But it is primarily a disruptive and destructive actor. Russia seeks to undermine faith in the integrity of the information environment. It seeks to undermine support for various causes. It seeks to sow dissent. It uses every possible technical tool to do so. But Russia is primarily, not exclusively, for domestic audiences, they do articulate a positive message with international audiences, they sometimes do as well, but primarily they are seeking to disrupt and undermine. The PRC operates quite differently. The signature report on this was probably the 2020 Freedom House report on the PRC's global megaphone. More recently, the Global Engagement Center released a report on the PRC's effort to control global discourse. And those are really the highlights there. If Russia is seeking to undermine and disrupt, the PRC is seeking to control and propagate its message of the PRC as the leading, responsible, constructive, creative power. And they've invested billions of dollars in an apparatus of everything from TV stations to media outlets to do this. What does the Global Engagement Center do today? Let me do one brief preamble and say what we do not do. We do not look at the information environment in the United States. We're not focused at all on the US. We don't operate in the US. We don't seek influence the US. We are totally separate from all of the domestic environment that comes from our legislation, that comes from the State Department authorities. So the Global Engagement Center is outwardly focused. There are right now two major lines of effort, one defensive and one offensive. The defensive effort is to make like-minded nations more resilient to information manipulation by aggressive actors like Russia and the PRC. Our major tool for doing this is the Framework to Counter Foreign State Information Manipulation. This is an actual diplomatic instrument. It is the first one that our office has ever had. So the 5 areas that it identifies, the first, and I'll put them in the form of questions, do you have a national strategy to deal with this? The US, for example, does not have a national strategy, so that's one area where we're maybe not an example for the world. But that's the first question. Do you have a national strategy? Second, do you have dedicated institutions? Here's an example where we do have dedicated institutions. The Global Engagement Center is a dedicated institution. The second is, do you have the technical and the human capacity to study and understand the information environment to respond to this challenge? And this is hugely complex. It involves expertise, it involves technical tools, but that's the third key area. The fourth key area is really having a robust civil society, media, and academic academic institutions. Why? Well, these are really the people who understand what's happening best. Journalists are often the best placed to do exposés, to investigate what aggressive actors are doing in the information space, and the civil society space is often the most credible place for a response. Government has things that it can speak to. It can speak to policy, but in most cases, government is not the most credible communicator. We're seeking to go toe-to-toe with disinformation and propaganda. So that fourth key area of having civil society, media, and academic institutions is very important. The last key action area in the framework is multilateral engagement, because there is a lot to be gained from countries exchanging information, working together, et cetera. So the idea behind these 5 areas behind the framework is that as countries adopt this, and to date we've had, I believe, 20 countries sign on to the framework, we will start to create a community of like-minded nations that can work together on this. The more offensive effort is exposure. And here we've worked to expose the information operations of our adversaries. Last year, we exposed a Russian operation called the Social Design Agency that was targeting on audiences in South and Central America. And more recently this year, we exposed again, a Russian operation called the African Initiative that was seeking to spread disinformation about healthcare in Africa, specifically arguing that the US was using genetically modified mosquitoes to spread dengue fever, a kind of classic Russian Soviet-style active measure. But we were able to expose this really before they got off the ground. I will flag one significant development, which is that there is more what I would describe as narrative alignment between and among our adversaries than there was in the past. This is not true of every issue, and it's not true in every environment, but there is considerable, I would say, articulation of similar messages, which are basically blame America first. Whatever's bad in the world, it is America's fault. If it is dengue fever, somehow the Americans are behind it. There is a really significant ecosystem of Russian and PRC funded media outlets that can pick up on almost any narrative that's anti-American, and not just promote it through official means, but also launder it through proxies, amplify it with bots and other technical tools. And most of this proceeds without a need even for active coordination. So this is a really significant challenge, and one we're seeing more and more. And then lastly, there is a very specific bureaucratic issue that I should mention, which is the GEC's legislation does include a sunset clause. So if there is no congressional action between now and December 24th, on December 24th, the GEC will terminate. Now, the mission itself can, of course, be continued, but this is a specific legislative mandate that we certainly hope will be extended potentially in the context of the NDA. We are doing briefings on the Hill. We are explaining the work that we do. We're making the case, but I should flag that if that sunset clause would kick in, you would not have an empowered center with a legislative mandate. You could potentially lose expertise and leadership, not just the department's leadership, but the US government's leadership. And you could have a certain perception of flagging US commitment to the information space.